What's going on, you guys? Theo here with the big review, back yet again with another King of Fighters Allstar video, and today is Saturday, so you all know what that means. It is time for our weekly Saturday chat and chill, where we take a topic pertaining to the King of Fighters Allstar, and we discuss it. So this week I figured, being that the 7 Deadly Sins collaboration event is about to end, that we would sit down and collect our overall thoughts and give my full opinions on what I thought of this collaboration. So before we jump into all of that, make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe, and let's go ahead and discuss the 7 Deadly Sins collaboration as a whole and see how it measures up, in my opinion, to some of these other collaborations that we have had in the past. And I feel like the best place to start is going to be with the characters themselves, so we'll go ahead and discuss them first, because there was a lot of controversy going on when this collaboration was first announced, and I really do feel like, in retrospect, this will go down as probably one of the most controversial collaborations that we've ever had, which is really surprising and kind of crazy when you really consider the other kinds of collaborations that we've had. I mean, really, if you think about it, WWE, when that came around, that was a big shocker and nobody saw that one coming. But I feel like this one we had all seen coming forever, and this one ended up being way more controversial than that one ever was. So really it comes down to the character choices that were made. I know a lot of people that were big fans of this IP were really upset that they didn't get to see Escanor in the game, and it's one of those things where I really do sympathize with people on that. I feel like at the end of the day, whenever they go to pick characters for collaborations later on, for whatever we end up with next, they really need to pay attention to the community and what people want. It's kind of surprising to me that when you really think about it, this collaboration should have been a slam dunk for them, being that they've worked with this IP with Grand Cross for so long. You would think that they'd have a better finger on the pulse of what people really want out of these character choices, but it is what it is. I feel like the Escanor thing has been beaten like a dead horse, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It is, however, very upsetting that they really just didn't seem to have really any idea what they were doing when they made the character choices here, and that is overall very disappointing, especially for fans of this IP that were coming into our game for the first time. It really did leave a bad impression, but when you talk about the characters that we did get, I do feel like these characters, because a lot of people like to compare them to the 7 Knights, which I guess I can understand. 7 Knights was the last collaboration that we had before this one, so it's the freshest on people's minds. It's going to be the one that most people are going to compare to. But I really don't feel like these characters are bad. If you want to compare them to 7 Knights, then yes, of course. They're definitely not going to measure up to characters such as Dellen's or Rachel or any of the other characters that came along with 7 Knights that really kind of changed the way PvE and even PvP worked for quite a long time. So when you think about these characters, I do think that they have merit, and I do think that a lot of them are going to be very, very beneficial to you, as well as being characters that are going to have relevancy for quite a while, especially in PvP. PvP itself in Championship, live PvP that is, has really seen a big meta shift because of these characters, specifically because of characters such as Meliodas and Merlin and so on. And really, when you think about it, that is probably where those characters are going to see the most longevity. I do think that there's probably a good chance that as far as PvE is concerned, that these characters are probably going to end up getting phased out fairly quickly. The only ones that I really see holding on to any sort of relevancy in PvE overall are probably going to end up being Merlin and King. The rest of these characters are probably going to be characters that you can change out or that you can kind of upgrade from very quickly down the road, which you can say that about any collaboration, really. The relevancy issue has not been something that is just sequestered to this game or to this collaboration per se. It's more so one of those things that you see in any gacha game that you see over time with any event. Characters get power crept, so it is what it is. But we all kind of knew coming into this that the odds of these characters being able to measure up to such a lofty expectation as 7 Knights was probably going to be tough. So yes, it is a little bit disappointing, I suppose, if you're a big fan, but I do like these characters, and I'm someone coming into this collaboration, I've talked about this in the past, I'm someone who really didn't have much of a relationship with this IP, so for me, it was more so just a thing where I was like, alright, well, I'm going to try and get out of this as best I can without spending all my rubies and so on and so forth, and really, I felt like I got more out of this than I felt like I was going to starting out. Starting out, I really didn't expect much. I really didn't want much. I really didn't care, to be brutally honest. None of this stuff really kind of appealed to me, but it grew on me over time, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that it's by any means my favorite collaboration, because it's not. I really still honestly don't care very much, but at the same time, for people who are fans of this IP that did get enjoyment out of it, I'm happy for you guys. So, and like I said, it did grow on me. I did become a bit of a fan of Merlin, for instance, and it's one of those things where I feel like any collaboration, no matter what happens with it, whatever the choice is that Netmarble makes, there's always going to be a vocal part of the community that voices their disdain for whatever was chosen. You know, you can't no, trust me, I know this as a YouTuber. You can't please everyone, and this, I'm sure, made a lot of people very happy. But at the same time, it's one of those things where I know that there is sort of this kind of, I don't want to say hesitancy, but there's definitely a difference between whenever they decide to collaborate with things like animes versus fighting games or video games or in general. And for me, I understand that, right? I get that. I would much prefer that we saw a Tekken rerun, or even a Sam Show rerun, or a Volume 2 for Sam Show, or heck, the Street Fighter collaboration that we all want. Any of those things to me would have been better. But at the same time, like I've said, we knew this was going to come. We knew Seven Deadly Sins was just too juicy of an opportunity for them to pass up. It's unfortunate that they really messed it up with the update, being that they already were upsetting people with the character choices being a little bit controversial, and then they doubled down on it with a really, really shoddy update that was just filled with bugs that were waiting and biting on bated breath to get this thing peeled back so that we can go back to having a game that's fully functioning, or at least mostly functioning. So, you know, it was definitely a mixed bag, and for me, this is going to be one of those collaborations that largely I'm just going to forget about. I'm going to be honest with you guys. You know, here in a couple of months, this is going to be a collaboration that I don't even really think back on. And that's unfortunate, but I knew that coming into it. You know, really, for me, as far as the events and things like that, you know, they were okay. I really did feel like, though, they could have gone a little bit further, and this is probably where this event faltered the most for me. I feel like this was a very rushed event overall. There didn't seem, and you know, really comparing apples to apples, I don't feel like they probably had too much extra content with some of the past collaborations versus this one, but I would have liked to have seen something else. You know, it would have been nice if we would have gotten a roulette with a character on it, or if we would have gotten some form of other mode where we would have been able to get some other types of rewards and things like that. And, you know, I get that this one was pretty much, give or take, for the most part, depending on the collaboration, on par as far as the amount of content with those other collaborations that we've had in the past. But I really do feel like they could have went a little bit further with this. You know, a lot of people like to throw out there when you talk about this topic that, oh, well, they already had these assets and yada, yada, yada. I have a hard time believing that these are reused assets. Typically, whenever you introduce assets into a different game entirely, you have to rebuild them from the ground up. You know, this game graphically and kind of just functionally is completely different from Grand Cross. So I do think that they probably had to go in and make these characters from scratch. So anybody who thinks that they just kind of copy pasted all this stuff in, I really don't believe that that's the case. But at the same time, you know, they did have plenty of time to get this stuff done. But then again, there is the entire thing about COVID, which you never know how that whole thing works, and you know, how that affected them the past few months. And so you do want to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt at the end of the day. But I feel like that's only going to go so far, especially when Netmarble, for right or for wrong, has kind of developed a bit of, you know, they've developed this kind of idea amongst the community that they don't listen, or that they are just out for money, or whatever the case may be. And I feel like that is just going to be the case with most people who are more on the casual side. I don't want to even just say that, but just there's always going to be that large amount of a player base that always just looks at the company that's providing the game, that just looks at them as if they're just money grubbing and they just want more money. And You know, that's probably true. They are a business, though, and they've got to keep the lights on and pay employees. I get that, but at the same time, I do feel like Netmarble does get a little too much crap sometimes, if I'm being honest, because they do try. They do try to talk to us. You know, I have a long history and a long standing with a lot of different gacha games. I've played tons and tons of gachas. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't even put Netmarble near the bottom of the list of the different developers that have made the different games that I've played. You know, put it this way, to give you guys a bit of a history lesson. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Attack on Titan Tactics, but that was a short-lived mobile gacha game that was very, very good for what it was. But Kayak, which was the people who developed it, they just really did not care whatsoever about communication. They didn't try to improve things. They did not even try to address issues. They were just completely and utterly in their own little world and completely sequestered to whatever they were doing, and it basically killed the game out the gate. I mean, by the time it got to global, because I played in Japanese account, you know, by the time it got to global, the game lasted less than a year and it got completely closed down. And a lot of it just had to do with the fact that they just didn't try. And so with Netmarble, I feel like overall with this collaboration, yes, they screwed up in a lot of ways, but they did at least try to address those issues quickly. You know, if you look back at the idea of what happened with Merlin and the controversy surrounding her getting changed, and I do feel like down the road, Netmarble needs to make it more apparent to people that, hey, by the way, these are beta versions of these characters. They might change for balancing reasons and so on and so forth. Or just make sure that whatever they end up showing off whenever they get to that point, they make sure that it is the final product to avoid that controversy, because we saw it to a much smaller extent with Athena, the SS Athena that is, and that really did not cause as much of a stir on the global side as it did on the Korean side at the time. But once Merlin came out and people realized that they had changed her around, I mean, the crap hit the fan. So I feel like that is something they need to work on, but it is very cool that they did go ahead and change her back and fix her. Yes, they didn't fix every little detail that they had changed, but she's in a very good place. So overall, with the 7 Deadly Sins collaboration, is it the best collaboration I've ever played? No, it's not my favorite collaboration, and I told you guys starting out that this wasn't going to end up being a collaboration that I was going to be a huge fan of, just because it's not something that necessarily I'm a big fan of in general. But at the same time, I have the respect enough to understand that there are fans of this IP, there are fans of this anime, there are fans of Grand Cross, way more fans of Grand Cross than I'm sure than there are King of Fighters Allstar. But for them, at least if they got enjoyment out of it, they got to play our game, come in, join up. I've seen a lot of new faces in the comments, then that's what it's all about for me. So overall, not my favorite collaboration in the world, but hey, what can you do? But you guys let me know your ideas or your opinions in the comment section down below. I appreciate all of you so much again for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.
Continue.